In May 2017, I filmed Dipper's nest building on the Hujirt, a small tributary of the Winch River, at about 2,100 meters in the Mongolian Altai. Enthralled by the little birds and their surroundings, and enticed by the serenity of life beside the water and the chance of adding to our knowledge of the species, I returned in 2018 to film during egg-laying and incubation. I arrived in the Altai in June with Enkbat and Batbaya, the same crew as before, after a 3-day drive from Ulaanbaatar. We started checking rivers and streams for dippers and for their characteristic long white droppings. And we asked local people about them too. Winter in the Altai had been much drier than in the previous year, with a lot less snowfall. The Winch River was shallower, allowing us to ford it and explore a new stream, the Nutsken. We soon spotted dippers there, and we found abundant insect larvae too in fast-flowing rapids. We set up camp at about 1,900 meters and spent a week observing 2 pairs of dippers at their nests, each with full clutches of 4 eggs. The nests were in very different sites. The downstream nest was in an earth bank 70 centimeters above the water. The upstream one was under a huge boulder nearly 2 meters up in the roof of a cave beside a loud waterfall and invisible from outside. The downstream male and female were instantly distinguishable. The female had darker plumage similar to the European subspecies, and the male had the white belly and pale head typical in the Altai. Only one of each pair incubated, and we assumed, based on the literature, that this was a female. The females usually sat for 60 to 70 minutes and then left the nest for between 3 and 7 minutes. At the downstream nest, the female normally dropped plop out of the nest into the water before flying off, almost always far downstream. Sometimes she flew off the nest and landed briefly before flying on downstream. Only occasionally did she feed near the nest. On her return, the female usually flew back directly or in stages to the shingle opposite the nest, where she bobbed up and down for another 2 or 3 minutes before flying up to the entry rock and in. On a couple of occasions she backed out or turned around for some reason and went in again a few seconds later. At the upper nest, the access was spectacular. Here the female first drops down from the waterfall onto that large rock and then flies up to the nest, which is out of sight. Here she is on the way out. While the female was incubating, the male spent a lot of time near the nest, feeding, bobbing, standing, or preening. That I expected. What I did not expect was this. The males fed the females on the nest, and they fed them frequently. Look at how the male perches each time on the entrance rock, and listen to the churring noise he makes as he passes over the food. This kind of mate feeding in dippers is mentioned only rarely in the literature. S.M. Bryan's 1996 Stirling University PhD thesis was the only place I found it described in any detail. He recorded it 19 times in 158 hours of nest observation, whereas we saw it 125 times in 52 hours. Here, 4 times within 5 minutes. The energy budgets of dippers in the Altai must differ considerably from those in Scotland, with lower air and water temperatures and the complications of diurnal snow melt. Males also made nest visits without food, still churring. Sometimes the male brought food when the female was not on the nest, and he often went through the same procedure, including the churring call, until she returned. On some occasions he flew down and fed her below the nest after she returned. When male and female met at the nest, one or both of them often performed a display with beak held high. Here there was a brief attempt at mating. All had been going well for the dippers on the Nutskan, but when we moved up to the Hujirt, we were in for a surprise. We found the stream totally dried up at its confluence with the Winch. At the lower of the two 2017 nest sites, there was water in the stream, but little flow. The upper site was on a 250-metre stretch of running water that emerged from the dry stream bed, flowed slowly above rocks and pebbles festooned with long filamentous algae, and then disappeared below ground. The 2017 nest had been rebuilt, and inside were 2 eggs. Every morning for the next 3 days, male and female visited the nest site, sometimes alone, sometimes together, and they interacted frequently, and then left for most of the day. It was difficult to distinguish the birds, as they were both pale-phase, but their behaviour at first seemed consistent with the female laying an egg each morning and the male attending nearby. Something was odd, though. On 2 occasions, both birds entered the nest in turn. And when we left, after 3 days, we found that the female had not laid any more eggs. This likely breeding failure could have been due to insufficient food. There were insect larvae under stones on the stream bed, but the thick algal cover appeared to make them pretty inaccessible to dippers. Look at the difference in water level between the 2 years. Here in 2017 and here in 2018. Local herder Maksajav said that because the Hujet's catchment is less extensive than the Nutskans, it tends to dry up in years with low snowfall. The last time this happened, he recalled, was in 2008. We went on up the Winch Valley, requiring a tow from a passing van at one point. We saw dippers on another 3 streams in all, 2 fast-flowing and 1 clogged with algae. The highest we saw them was at 2,500 metres, here on the Arshan. The birds coexisted with people and livestock wherever we found them. One day on the Nutskin, the downstream female was flushed from the nest by a passing cow. In July, just 3 weeks after we left for Ulaanbaatar, sudden heavy rain caused floods in the Altai, so the dippers' fortunes may have changed, for the better or for the worse. There's a lot we can learn about animals by sitting and watching. In 2019, I plan to return after incubation for the hatching and the feeding of the young.